Hey everyone, and welcome. Today we're going to dive into a really fascinating logical puzzle, one that comes to us from the ancient Talmud but feels surprisingly, modern. It all boils down to a pretty simple question that has a very complicated answer. What do you do when your plans, and even your backup plans, all go sideways at once?
So let's just jump right in. We've all been there, right? You make a plan, something goes wrong, so you make a backup. But what happens when that backup fails too? And then, out of nowhere, your original plan is back on the table. It's a total mess, and we're about to explore that kind of problem through a lens that's, about 2,000 years old.
So, here's our roadmap. We're going to start with the puzzle itself, the lost offering. Then we'll look at two totally different solutions from a couple of brilliant scholars, Rava and Abaye. After that, we'll throw in a pretty complex twist with a different kind of offering. And finally, we'll get to the heart of it and unlock the deeper logic behind the whole debate.
All right, first things first, let's set the stage for this amazing thought experiment.
Okay, so picture this. A guy sets aside an animal for a voluntary thanks offering. We'll call it animal number 1. But then it gets lost. Bummer. So he does the responsible thing. He designates a replacement, animal number 2. And then, in a crazy stroke of bad luck, animal number 2 also gets lost. So he designates a third animal. And just then, poof, all 3 animals are suddenly found standing right there. Now here's the problem. He only needs to sacrifice 1. So, what in the world is supposed to happen to the other 2?
This is where the ancient scholars step in. First up is Rava, who comes in with a very specific, kind of intricate solution that's all based on a really clear chain of command.
So for Rava, the whole thing hinges on this one core idea. This isn't just a big pool of 3 animals. No, it's a chain. Animal 3 replaces animal 2, and animal 2 replaces animal 1. The links are direct, they're linear. And that single idea, it's the key to his entire system.
Okay, now let's see how that chain logic actually plays out. A little context. A thanks offering also needed loaves of bread to go with it. So look at that first row with me. If you use animal number 1 for the sacrifice, its direct replacement, animal 2, is now, it's redundant. It's off the hook, doesn't need any loaves. But animal 3 was the replacement for number 2, which wasn't sacrificed, right? So number 3 still needs its loaves, almost like it's a new, separate offering. It's like a domino effect. You see it in the last row too. If you sacrifice the third animal, the second doesn't need loaves. But because the second wasn't used, the first one does. It's all connected in a line.
But wait, there's another take on this. Let's turn to our next scholar, Abaye. He basically looked at Rava's whole complex system and said, I think there's a much simpler way to look at this.
And this one line just perfectly sums up his whole philosophy. For Abaye, it's not a chain, it's a collective, a pool. All 3 animals are just mutually interchangeable replacements for that one single original obligation.
And the result of that thinking is incredibly straightforward. You just pick any one of the 3 animals, doesn't matter which, and you sacrifice it. Once that's done, the obligation is totally fulfilled. The other 2 animals, they're just extra. They don't need any loaves. One and done. It's a much cleaner, much simpler solution, right?
Okay, so just when you think you've got it all figured out, the Talmud does what it does best. It raises the stakes. What if this wasn't about a voluntary thanks offering? What if it was about an obligatory sin offering? And this twist changes everything. You see, a thanks offering is voluntary. It's you expressing gratitude. But a sin offering, a chitat, that's obligatory. It's something you have to do to atone for a specific mistake. And because of that, the rules for any leftovers are much stricter.
And when I say stricter, I mean it's pretty grim. There are basically 2 potential fates for a leftover sin offering. First, if the owner has already taken care of their atonement, the extra animal is just left to die. It can't be used for anything else. The second fate, which is a little bit better, is for an animal whose replacement was the one that got sacrificed. That one is left to graze in a field until it gets a blemish, and then it can be sold. So yeah, these are the harsh new outcomes we're dealing with.
So let's plug these new rules back into Rava's chain logic. Take a look at that top row again. If animal number 1 is sacrificed, its direct replacement, animal number 2, is now a leftover whose owner has atoned. So according to that rule we just learned, it must be left to die. But what about animal number 3? Well, it was a replacement for number 2, which wasn't sacrificed. So it gets the other fate. It's left to graze. Once again, you can see that clear step-by-step domino effect from his whole chain of replacement idea.
And Abaye? Well, he stays perfectly consistent. For him, they're all just one big pool of replacements for one single obligation.
So the moment you sacrifice any of them, the atonement is done. The other two are now just obsolete sin offerings whose owner has already atoned. So what's their fate? They are both left to die. No complicated chains, no dominoes, just one simple, stark outcome.
So this brings us to the final and maybe the most important question of all. Why did the Talmud even need to bring up this second, much more intense case? I mean, if the scholars just apply the same logic to both, what was the point? Why wasn't the first example good enough?
This is really the aha moment. The text is essentially asking itself, look, if Rava and Abaye are just applying their same core principles to both of these scenarios, what new information are we actually learning from this whole sin offering example?
And here is the absolutely brilliant part. It's about challenging Rava's logic. In that first case, with the voluntary thanks offering, someone could argue, hey, maybe animal number 3 isn't a replacement at all. Maybe the owner just felt extra grateful and decided to offer another voluntary sacrifice, you know? You can always increase your thanks.
But, and this is the whole point, you can't do that with a sin offering. You can't just volunteer to atone for a sin you didn't commit, or try to atone for the same sin twice. It just doesn't work that way. So the text brings up the sin offering case to prove that Rava's logic holds up even when that whole maybe he's just being generous argument is completely off the table. It proves his core principle. This chain of replacement thing is a fixed legal status, not just about what the owner might be thinking at the moment.
And all of this leaves us with a really fascinating thought to chew on. This ancient debate isn't just about offerings. It's about two totally fundamental ways of looking at the world. Do you see a problem as a linear chain of cause and effect, where each step only affects the very next one, or do you see it as a collective pool, where all the pieces are interconnected and influence each other all at once? The way we answer that question, well, that can change how we solve just about everything. Thanks for digging into this with me.